get it. What's going on, everybody? I'm your host, SchuZ Shoemaker. Welcome to the SchuZ Show. Today, I've got a very special guest joining me. He's a man with a 14-0 record, 12 KOs to his name. He's currently ranked number 4 in the WBA. And upcoming, he is a 12-round WBA world title eliminator. That's Darius Fulghum. Darius, appreciate you taking time to come on today, man.
I just appreciate your time for having me on, brother.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, we got to get right to it, man. You've got a fight upcoming now. You're just about 2 weeks out from it. What's the emotions? What do you got going on in your mind right now?
Oof. Right now, bro, just I always think how extremely blessed I am. It's a
Yeah.
great opportunity. Shout out to Go to Boy and WBL. They've done a great job on putting in position for this opportunity.
Mhm.
So I'm just extremely blessed, and I'm ready to seize the moment.
You know, what's crazy, I was going back and reading an article, I think it was from 2022 or 2023, I think actually like December 2022, and it talked about the game plan for you. And Golden Boy, I think it was Bernard Hopkins talking about you and saying, you know what, by 2025, that's the year I see Darius Fulghum becoming a world champion, being a guy that's going to compete for that. We're in 2025 now, you have this title eliminator. Is it shocking to you to realize the position you're in now?
I wouldn't say the word shocking. I've
Okay.
been extremely fortunate and blessed that everything I feel like is falling into the right time, and like throughout my whole entire career, amateurs included,
Hmm.
while I was in school trying to pursue my nursing degree,
Okay.
it was kind of tough for me, right? Like I
Hmm.
didn't know what path I was gonna go. And luckily for me, I graduated right before the Olympic trials came around and was able to seize that opportunity, join Team USA. And then now unfortunately, COVID kind of got in the way and all that, but
Yeah.
was able to still make my mark. So I think once I turned pro, everything's been falling in line, and everything that we mapped out has been going according to plan.
This upcoming fight for yourself is by far the biggest one in your career. I believe you headlined before. I'm not sure if it's been more than one time before, but this is going to be the biggest fight of your life. Main event, title eliminator against another fellow top ranked guy. When you realize the stage you're going to be stepping up to and realizing that this is a very, very high level for yourself, does that bring a different level of maybe focus or intensity towards this training camp? Or what kind of goes to your mind realizing the stage you're going to be stepping up to?
Hold on real quick.
I can't hear you right now. No, I cut out a little bit now. I can't hear you right now. No. Here, one sec. I'll cut to a commercial break. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully, we should be all good on that side now.
Yeah.
But as I was saying, Darius, so you have this massive opportunity for yourself. And I just am curious, when you talk about knowing that you're going to be fighting on this stage now, is it anything different the way that your mindset is now, just realizing how big of a stage you're going to be fighting on now?
No, nothing changed for me. I'll tell you one thing for me going to the fight, my mindset hasn't changed at all. Like I don't want to think of this fight as being anything different
Okay.
than anything in my previous fights because every fight is so important. If I did not win my pro debut, I would not be here now. If I didn't
Good
win my
point.
last fight, I would not be in this position now. And so the stakes I feel like are always going to be the same. I try not to in my head make this at a greater magnitude than what it needs to be.
Hmm.
I need this moment to feel like just any other day. So really that's my mindset. But ultimately, it is a big opportunity for me. I can't try
Yeah.
to say that it's not, because this propelled me right to where I'm trying to be, where I can contend for a world title. And so I'm blessed with that. I can't say it enough. I'm ready for this moment, though. But my preparation has been great so far. But as far as my mentality, nothing has changed.
I have to imagine you probably still have another week or two of training camp before you obviously go in and get ready for fight week and whatnot. But the way you feel right now, and I know, like I said, it probably would be a little bit better if I were to ask you this question a week or two, but where you
Right.
feel right now, is this going to be the best version of Darius Fulghum that we've seen?
I think without a doubt, honestly,
Okay.
especially in this one, I guess I would say I had like a lot more time on dialing in and locking in
Okay.
compared to previous fights.
Sure.
But I've done everything I need to do, and that's all I can ask for is for my camp is make sure that I've prepared to my utmost ability. And I've done everything I need to do, and I feel like I've done that. So,
Okay.
uh,
Oh, can you hear me? It cut out again real quick. Can you hear me?
can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Hold up. Test. Test.
Can you hear me?
We're all good. So let's get right back to that, though. So as I said, now you kind of look at this upcoming fight, and this is going to be obviously a huge fight for yourself. But if you were to make a prediction as of now, 2.5 weeks out from the fight, what do you think is going to happen on May 30th?
I can tell you for sure I know I'm gonna win.
Okay.
I say that with just a lot of confidence in myself. I think Beck is a great opponent. I think
Yeah.
he's a great competitor. He has a great pedigree, a lot of experience. But I really believe in myself a lot. I believe in my preparation, my ability. I think I got all the tools I need to win. How I win, I have no idea. I
Sure.
try not to think too far ahead into that, the specifics. But I think, like I said, it'll be my best performance for sure.
Now, as we said, this is going to be an incredible opponent, but when you talk about when this fight comes to conclusion, May 30th is done, the main event's done. As you said, you plan on winning that fight. What's the statement that you want to make? What do you want people to take away from Darius Fulghum and say, you know what? I think this about Darius Fulghum. What do you want that statement to be?
Well, the good thing about this fight, right, is kind of the narrative that started being portrayed is like, oh, this is a tough fight, big step up, 50-50 fight,
Sure.
which is something exactly what I've wanted, to be kind of on the other side of a matchup, right?
Mm.
Compared to beforehand, it was like odds were heavily in my favor to win.
Yeah.
And so when I had fights that I would dominate, it would look like, oh, it was just the opponent, this
Yeah.
is a bad opponent. But this is an opponent that they can't take away from. You
Hmm.
know, he's a very credible guy, very durable, and the statement I want to leave is like not like a Gabe Rosado statement, boom, knockout. Like I wanted to be a fight where it's like, oh, yo, we thought this was gonna be close. Like we were wrong. And so I just want to put the statement, the fans, the vision on notice. Who I am, I think it's a perfect guy I can do this against, right?
Yep.
I come out and look stubborn, look fantastic, then I have to give him my respect.
Yeah.
Right? Then sometimes beforehand, I don't feel like I necessarily got it, right?
Hmm.
People think it's too early for me. So it's a same performance how I kind of want to shock the world and make my name known. So anytime when I watch any sort of 168 fights, they have to mention me in the rankings for that. They got to
Yep.
mention, hey, we need to see Caleb Plant versus Darius. We need to see, Belanga versus Darius. We need to see Mungia versus Darius, or whoever the case may be. I
Yeah.
just want to put my name out there.
You just brought up an interesting point because 168 is an interesting weight class because of the fact that you have Canelo Alvarez, who's obviously in the later stages of his career. He's only going to have X amount of fights left in his life. And so, obviously, being that it's a title eliminator, most divisions would be a situation where you're guaranteed a world title shot next. Obviously, we don't know exactly how the card will play out with him there. So, when you mention just what could possibly be next, and obviously, I don't want you overthinking this upcoming opponent, but you
Right.
mentioned a guy like Caleb Plant, who is the obviously interim world champion there. Is that a fight you could be looking at? Is there something else you could be looking at in terms of guys? And Billy's obviously a great fight. Mugia. Is that something you're going to be doing, or would you want to wait out until Canelo is available for yourself if you come out victorious on May 30th?
No, I don't see myself waiting on Canelo, honestly,
Okay.
because then I'll be waiting forever.
Good point.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of great guys in the division, and even beating Beck, I don't think is still deserving of a Canelo fight, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
there's certain guys that I feel like should be well deserving. I don't feel like Berlanga really deserved the Canelo fight. And ultimately, who knows what's going to happen with Canelo, right? I think the landscape of 160 is going to change a lot very soon. There's a lot of big fights at 168 coming up. Um, so who knows what's really going to happen? It's kind of hard to predict what's going to happen next,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? But I'm definitely not in a position where I'm going to wait on. There's a lot of other big fights to be made, and a lot of big fights and opponents that I want to be share a ring with. So um, we May 30th. We'll see what the landscape looks like after that. Like I said, you got Plain and Charlotte. I'm fighting again.
Yep.
I think either Hassan and Billy is fighting.
Yeah, I think he fights in July
Uh,
or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think he's fighting Selecki, and you got Pacheco fighting McCumbee, and so
Yep.
there's a lot of guys going. So we just got to see how the landscape changes. Who knows?
So basically, your mindset would just be, I just want to make big fights, stay active, and eventually we know it's the next 2 or 3 years. Canelo's probably gonna be gone. At that point, we can really go for the world championship shots. Then,
Yeah, absolutely. We just want to put ourselves in a position for when the opportunities come up, we can take it. Right.
yeah.
We just want to put ourselves in a position where even if say Canelo after the Crawford fight was to be done and retired, the belts then are opened up.
Mm-hmm.
They're free. They're free for all for anybody to go grab them.
Yep.
So I just want to put myself in a position where, as the case, I can go grab it.
I like that, man. Well, I want to go into your journey a little bit because you have a great story getting to this point. I want people to get to know who you are a little bit better. And so, going all the way back, I just got to ask: was boxing the sport that you grew up loving? Was that what you always wanted to do, or when did you fall in love with the sport of boxing?
Man, I didn't. I was never a fan of boxing and never watched boxing at all growing up. I'm from Texas. I was kind of more like a football guy,
All right.
and my brother was a football player, and so I always looked up to him, and so that was always what I wanted to do. But anytime, like growing up, I just never had like that desire for that passion for it. I felt like it was just something I had to do, but I didn't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was in high school, I started wrestling, and I fell in love with that because it was complete accountability. I had nobody else to blame, point fingers at.
Yep.
Like if I lost, because I lost. Because I won, because I won.
Mm-hmm.
And it taught me a lot about life. And so I started at high school. When I finished my senior year, I had this itch. I was like, man, I got to do something else. Like I really fell in love with that, but it was for such a short period of my life. And originally I was going to do MMA. But then I stepped into a boxing ring. I fell in love with it immediately. And I said, oh, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. So
Mm-hmm.
that's when I started watching boxing. I started watching
All right.
boxing. That was 2015, like around March when I started. So, we didn't came up on now 10 years. I
Mm-hmm.
started doing this, and so it's been an amazing journey. But I had to grow up and learn quickly because I didn't have, I didn't start when I was 6, 7 years old with all this experience, right?
Right.
I started when I was 18, going on 19, and so I was on the fast track. I had to fight as much as I could, get in the ring with whoever. Um, but I've been blessed with the journey though.
So, what was the differentiating point? Because you said obviously MMA was technically on the table for yourself. You did like wrestling. What was it about boxing that you said, you know what, this is what God's calling me to. This is what I really want to pursue.
Ooh, it's kind of hard to say what was the initial thing because I remember after I was wrestling, I went and did jiu-jitsu for like a couple weeks.
Okay.
But uh, the coach at the time, I feel like he was kind of just using me for wrestling, and he wasn't really teaching or showing me anything.
Okay.
And so I was like, man. And once I started going to the boxing gym, I was like a lot better like relationship there
Gotcha.
with the first coach and stuff. And so I think ultimately that was kind of like the thing that I love and had a great bond. It was kind of it was really just like me and him in the garage, And
Sure. Sure.
so that's kind of how I got started. And I think that relationship was a big catalyst on what kind of really got me into strictly boxing.
So you feel like you probably could have been quite successful either route it was. It almost kind of came down to who was the most relational person, and that kind of helped motivated you.
Yeah, I think I still would do good in MMA. Like
Yeah.
a lot of wrestling, my wrestling background, I still use a lot of things that I've learned in
Yeah.
boxing. And they always say, especially for wrestling, that's like a staple that you really need to have is a good wrestling background. And now I kind of got both. I do think I could transition and do MMA still.
Hmm.
Not gonna lie, bro, I can't do kicking though.
Fair enough.
Hey, listen, I remember watching was it Anderson Silva when he broke his leg
Yeah.
from a leg kick and that traumatized me. That's I got like the weakest shins, you know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
All right. So we're not gonna go to MMA route then. Boxing's your safe
No.
place then.
Yeah. We're already locked in here. I already made a decision.
Absolutely, man. Well, what you said was crazy too, because like you said, you didn't start boxing until 19 years old. Now, that is something we have seen people. I know Deontay Wilder's most famous story people talk about, not starting until 22 years old. But That's not the common thing. A lot of guys start off when they're really young. Their
Yeah.
grandfather, their dad, their boxers, whatever it was, and they just kind of grew up understanding the fundamentals. Obviously, it was the amateur ranks and whatnot. You don't start until 19 years old, and yet you're going to be fighting for a world title eliminator coming up soon. That's not a very common storyline you hear. So, how are you able to progress and develop into the fighter you are, while even though you started so late?
Man, I was just so locked in and disciplined, bro. This is
Mm,
all I wanted. This is all I wanted to do. And granted, I was doing other things, right? I was still in school, still went to college, right?
yeah,
But the entire time I was in college, like everybody at PV knew that boxing was what I was going to do. I got my degree in nursing, but nursing was not what I planned on doing. Once I
okay,
graduated, I was all in on boxing. Um, so I think that was a big difference maker for me. Was I was so locked in and dialed in on what I wanted.
mm,
Um, and once you kind of know that, then it's just follow the pathway on how to get there. Um, but I was extremely disciplined, bro. I mean, I made a lot of sacrifices to get to this point. I mean, it definitely was not easy.
yep,
you
sure,
know. But good thing too, I didn't have as much wear and tear also from
good point.
doing this from when I was 7, or I wasn't burnt out.
Yeah,
So once I started this and I had the love for this, it was always fueled. Like I didn't have any hatred, right? Like a lot
hmm,
of people when they start younger, they kind of regret a lot of things they missed out from their childhood that they weren't able
that
to
is true.
do when
Hmm,
that wasn't necessarily the case for me.
hmm,
So I think there's a lot of pros and cons with it, but I think for sure the biggest thing on how to get this point is I was extremely locked in. Like I said, when I started, I made a decision. I said I'm gonna become a world champion,
okay.
and I was so locked in on that. So I think that's the
Now, you also talked about something we have to get into, and that's the fact that you have graduated from college and you have a nursing degree. That's something that for a lot of boxers, it's not the same story because when you talk about boxing, it's obviously not a collegiate sport where you can go to college and get a scholarship and you go do that way. And you chose to still go to college and pursue academics, even though you already knew you wanted to be a boxer. Why was that the decision you made?
Well, I think it was important to really secure my future. It was important, for my family.
Hmm.
Because, boxing in any sport is nothing's ever really promised, right? Like, there's
Right.
so many things that can happen that can derail anybody, right? It doesn't have to be somebody's not good or talented enough. It could be something simple as an injury, an accident, or
Yep.
whatever the case may be. And I didn't necessarily want that to be me. And then I'm like, dang, what do I do now, right?
Hmm.
So it was important to me that I finished school first. But like I said, I mean, it wasn't easy because boxing was always what I wanted to do, but I had to sacrifice boxing. There was a point in time during school where I had to take a lot of time off. Like I couldn't go to these amateur tournaments and be gone for a week.
Mm.
You know, there one time I was trying to go to nationals. I wasn't able to go. I had finals that week, and tried talking to the dean about it, but there's nothing they can do. I had to be there, right? And I don't want to fail.
Yep.
So there's a lot of missed opportunities I missed out on too to really make a name for myself in the amateur route where I wasn't able to go to these big tournaments. But I'm blessed. Like I said, everything happened for a reason.
Yep.
I'm here now, so.
That had also be kind of an interesting situation because I think right when you graduated, it was COVID time. And so you're at a situation now, obviously, that nurses were high in demand. It's something you could have obviously pursued and went right into if you still wanted to. But I have to ask long term, is that something that you would ever go back and try being a nurse if you're later on in life? That's something still on the table for yourself post boxing career?
Well, one thing I gotta mention too. So this is another big thing that I realized, especially turning pro and pursuing my boxing career, was when I really realized how much I wanted this. And so I was getting ready to try to go for the Olympics and stuff, or
Hmm.
still on Team USA, and we were getting paid a little bit. We weren't getting paid, much, and
Yeah.
I had classmates who, during this time during COVID, who were getting travel nursing contracts, and I'm talking about they're making like 18K a week.
Yeah.
This time they're making big money. And not for a second during that moment did I ever think in my head like, oh man, like, let me go, forget all this. Let me go chase this money and go get these nursing travel contract jobs.
Yeah.
And I think that was the big moment I realized how much I really wanted this because I
Mm.
wasn't just chasing it. I can go make easy money easy,
Yeah.
right? Okay, let me not say easy money,
Yeah,
like
sure. Yeah. No, I see what you
but
mean. Yeah.
but it was already it's already secured, right? Rather than what I'm doing. is a lot different. Any boxer will tell you this is a tough business, a tough industry to be in.
Hmm.
And so I think in that moment was when I realized how much I really wanted this. I never looked back. It wasn't even a thought like, oh man, let me go get this money.
Okay.
Right?
That's a huge thing. I got to follow up with that because I feel like so many people, give up on the dreams for the bag. And I get it, obviously, the sense of providing the certain people that do need the money and whatever that is, and that's fine. But at the same time, like you said, it's not always about the money. You want to become what the best version of yourself and what you are meant to do. And so you obviously chose that. You could have went the, as you said, in a sense, easier way in terms of easier money, more guaranteed money is probably the right
Yeah.
word to say there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you chose to pursue what you loved, even though it wasn't guaranteed. Walk us through that and just kind of giving inspiration to other people that are in this certain situation, that 18 to 22, 23 time range. Why should they pursue what they're meant to do, what they want to do, as opposed to just going for the guaranteed money?
I'm always a big proponent of pursuing passion over money, right?
Hmm.
Like I know too many people who work in jobs they hate and they can't stand. They're miserable. Their life is miserable
Hmm.
just because they're making a little extra dollar, right? I'm always going to tell people to pursue their passion over that, because you'll live a much more peaceful and happier life. And so, I mean, that was a big thing that I learned was I enjoy what I do. And there's plenty of times where I didn't have nothing. I had nothing in my bank account, nothing in my pockets, but I was still so happy to be doing what I'm doing.
Mm.
And it's simply just going to the gym and trying to pursue my dreams. And so, and look, money ruins a lot of people, and I'm not going to try to sit here and say money is important. Money is extremely important. We need it to live. Not going to
Yep.
sit here and say it's not, but a lot of times your passion will bring you some money.
100% agree, man. Now, let's go to that Olympic experience because obviously you made the qualifications, you nearly qualified for the actual Olympic team, then COVID got in the way, obviously shut down the eliminator, and they just had to go take a few guys to the Olympics. It was a hectic, crazy year that hopefully never happens again. You got put in that weird just situation there. Walk us through that whole process and how that all went for you and how you handled that.
So it was a little weird because when it first happened, we were kind of just unsure what was going to go. Was Olympics still going to happen,
Right.
right? Then we find out, okay, it got postponed a year. So we stayed on the team. We're still able to compete and travel. Went to Spain, Bulgaria. Was able to do different tournaments, get some more experience. And then for 2021, we're supposed to go to Argentina and qualify for our spot. Um, so now it's rolling around. We're in training camp, getting ready to go. I mean, we're going to leave in probably in a couple weeks. And we find out that that tournament got canceled for us. And they said it was because of like logistics reasons or something that Argentina couldn't host it.
Hmm.
Um, but so now it's up in there again. It's like, okay, well, what's going to happen, to us? Like, what are we doing? And ultimately, they made the decision that they're going to go with old ranking points to secure the spots for the American region,
Hmm.
um, which kind of left us out to dry. Where it's like we didn't even have an opportunity to qualify for our spot.
Yeah.
They weren't by. That's how some of the pros came back, and so it wasn't just me. It was a couple other guys on the team too, where we were just like, you know. And I know, they try to advocate for us to try to give us a chance, but there's nothing that can kind of be done.
Yeah.
And so I was soaking on that for like a little hot minute, where I'm
Yeah.
just kind of just like, oh man, like really feeling bad for myself. But ultimately, like I said, it is what it is. It happened. There's nothing I can do to really control it.
Right.
And it was just time to move on. There's other things in my career I wanted to do. Now it's time to go to the pro side. And so at that point in time, we just had to make the transition. But I still supported all my guys too, as was able to go to Tokyo.
Hmm.
Um, because that's an amazing experience, man. And
Right.
it was a lot different that time around too. Especially with COVID, we still had these protocols. Just competing in that time was a weird space, just mentally for a lot of people because we didn't have really interactions with anybody else. We would go overseas to go compete, and we're kind of like locked in a room.
Yeah.
We'll come out to train for a little bit, go back to the room,
Yeah.
then we come out to come eat, then go back to the room, then come out to go train, go back to the room. So it was a time of like this weird isolation. I started to realize what isolation do to a lot of people.
Hmm.
And it was a weird time for me being on Team USA during that time because I feel like I never got to showcase the best version of myself. I started to realize what that isolation was doing to me mentally when it
Mm.
was time to get ready to compete,
Sure.
right? And
Hmm.
so I learned a lot about myself during that process. So I think everything was well worth it because it's prepared me for where I'm at now.
Was that transition easy for yourself? Obviously, there's a big difference between amateur and pro fighting. Was there a difference for you? Was it pretty easy, seamless transition? Obviously, it's not easy ever, but it was a transition for you to just kind of get a hold of it pretty easily, or what was the transition like?
You talking about from amateurs to pros?
Correct. Yeah. Yep.
Honestly, I feel like it did because I didn't have an amateur style. Amateurs was not necessarily my forte. I was not
Okay.
a 3 round fighter.
Right.
I never was, never had been. I was never like quick, twitchy, with quick in and out movements, right?
Yep.
Since it wasn't my forte, I was more of like a breaking guys down type of guy. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why now doing these 10, 12 rounders, I feel like it's better suited for me,
All right.
because it gives me time to adjust, give me time to figure my opponent out and start slowly, slowly breaking them down. Um, and that's why I think obviously in the pros I have a better advantage at. Rather than amateurs, not so much. So pros is a lot more suited for me.
Right. All right. So you had quite the interesting start in terms of a promotional company. I know you were Probellum at very, very beginning parts of your career. Then obviously everything happened with them when they folded and all these things occurred. Golden Boy ends up picking you up, and you've obviously been with them ever since. What was that beginning portion like? I'm sure as a young guy, you're trying to get yourself settled, and that's going on in the background. How did you deal with that, and what was it like eventually coming to the conclusion that you're going to be with Golden Boy?
Well, it was interesting because I didn't know anything about the pro business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And technically I will say that I'm still learning about it. There's a
Sure.
lot that I don't know. Um, and especially during that time, I didn't like I had other deals on the table and stuff. I went with Pro Bellum. Was thinking that was the best decision at that point in time, and it was great. I got 3 fights under them, but things kind of happened with them, and it kind of fell through. So now was the time where I had to kind of figure it out myself,
Mm-hmm.
and so I took, a couple fights unsigned before I ended up signing with Golden Boy. Um, but signing with Golden Boy was, I'd say the best decision that I made. I don't regret it at all. They've done such a great job. I enjoy the staff, all the team, all the events that I fought on. They've been amazing. They've been fun.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot of experience. I feel like, especially even the matchmaking, they've been moving me at the right pace.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, so, like I said, I've learned a lot from the pro business. I think any fighter tell you learn something every single fight and it may not be something as simple as like in the fight, right? Like throughout the whole beginning of my career, I didn't necessarily really get hit like that at all. So I still, for a while, didn't know what it was like to get hit. But I learned a lot of stuff in my preparation on how I like to, when I'm cutting weight, on my diet,
Mm-hmm.
what I like to do in camp, getting ready for a fight to make sure that I'm feeling my best. So one camp I do something, and then I say, I didn't really care for that. Let me switch up and add something different. I'm gonna start doing these sprints on these days and doing long distance runs on these days.
Mm-hmm.
Sparring. Now I'm doing more rounds. I'm sparring. Uh, this many for this round fight or changing my schedule or how I'm doing my sparring rounds. So you kind of learn a lot just on the preparation part too, and you just get a lot more comfortable in it than dealing with the media stuff that comes with it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they did a great job on slowly moving me up. Where I feel like now, May 30th, I feel like we're perfectly ready for this moment.
I know I said in the beginning of the interview, but the fact that we go back 3 years ago and they already had a mapped out plan for you that you're going to be fighting for world title in 2025, and that's now come pretty much to fruition. Obviously, you had to do your part too, winning the fights, getting to the situation too. But just take us through just Bernard Hopkins, Oscar De La Hoya, and how good they've been to you in that sense of kind of making sure, like you said, perfectly matchmaking you, getting to the right situation, and being true to their word, saying, you know what, like you said, title eliminator now in May of 2025. Obviously, it will be on the table to possibly have a world title shot if that's available by this year. Walk us through that aspect of just how your relationship is with those two guys.
Man, it's been great, man. I talked to Bernard a lot. I talked to Oscar a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Besides just boxing stuff, they always still give me their wisdom.
Right.
Things after the fight on certain tactics or approaches that I should have done in the fight. So they've been instrumental to growth of my career. And the most important thing you can ask for any promoter, manager, anybody in the business is that they keep in their word.
Yep.
What they say they deliver on. So ain't nothing worse than somebody over promising and under delivering, right?
Right.
Saying,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, we're gonna do this, this, and that." One thing about Golden Boy I say is they kept their word, and that's the thing that means the most to me. That's one thing I'm extremely grateful for them for, and to be led by 2 Hall of Famers and those 2 guys.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, man, it's been the best.
That's the cool thing too, is that you talk about these two guys. They're both Hall of Famers. They've both been in your shoes before. They've been more than successful in the sport of boxing. Being able to pick their brain, kind of just get a better understanding, and like you said, learn from your flaws, learn from them, and you kind of utilize them as another coach or trainer in a sense too in that aspect. How cool has that been for you?
It's been dope. I mean, it's plenty of times I remember. It's funny. I'm fighting a southpaw, and I remember talking to Bernard about this once. And I was watching when he fought Tarver,
Mm-hmm.
and I was trying to ask him on some of his tactics that he was doing in that fight. I remember asking myself, man, how was Bernard able to really set up? Because I was watching the difference between how Bernard was fighting Tarver versus Roy Jones.
Mm-hmm.
I remember asking Bernard about that and how he was able to really set up him to keep catching him constantly with his right hand. So over and over again, but it was all in the setup though. Rather than I think
Mm-hmm.
Roy Jones is a lot faster fighter than Bernard, but Roy wasn't able to capitalize it like Bernard was, and it'd be like little subtle things like that, and it was cool to be able to pick Hopkins' brain about that.
Yeah. All right, well, I got a few more things before I let you go, Darius, and one of which is that we kind of briefly touched up on this as well, but when you look at, your future, let's say the next 12, 18 months, how many fights do you see yourself doing? Where do you see yourself? Like, if I were to talk to you again, like I said, in 12 to 18 months, where do you think you'll be in position-wise? World champion? How many fights you've accomplished? What do you see? Like, where do you see yourself 12 to 18 months from now?
We said a year from now, next summer. Like I said, the landscape is changing a lot. I definitely feel like I should be in a position where if I'm not a world champion at that point in time, then that is definitely what will be coming next.
Okay.
Like I said, we're limited now, so my next couple fights should be huge mega fights against big names. So
Mm-hmm.
by that point in time, to answer your question, I should be a world champion.
Love that, man. Well, is there anybody you have specifically on your mind? Say you get past Beck. Is there somebody else in your mind that you say, you know what, that's a guy I would love to fight? Whether that be as a guy that's a fun legacy fight, that'd be something that just would be exciting fight to have happen. Is there somebody else you'd want to fight?
Yeah, I mean, I like a lot of guys in the division. If I think there's anybody I want to fight, probably be Berlanga the most. He
Okay.
kind of has like this arrogance about him. I'm not necessarily too much of a fan of.
Sure.
So if anybody, if I wanted to fight it, it'd be him.
All right, man. Well, I got one final question for you. It's the question I like wrapping up every interview with. That's talking about your legacy. When your boxing career is done down the road, what is it that you want to accomplish, and what do you want to be remembered for what you've done inside and outside of that ring?
Okay, so I got kind of probably like I would say energy you haven't heard of before. And there was this interview Mike Tyson did,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of around the time when he was fighting Jake Paul or whatever. And it was like a little kid that asked him this question, kind of a similar thing about his
Mm-hmm.
legacy. And his response to that really was that he didn't care about legacy. Legacy is all in the ego.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Who cares what kind of person I am to really care about when I'm gone? What do people think of me?" It's a very egotistical thing, legacy, and it kind of resonated a lot with me. I've been reading these books about the ego and stuff, and as much as when I started my career, how much I cared about legacy, in a weird way, I don't really necessarily care about too much.
All right.
Obviously, I do want to give fans fights that they enjoy, but one thing I enjoy doing the most is doing this, winning, and winning in spectacular fashion.
Mm.
So whatever comes with that, comes with that. I just want to be present in the moment. I'm not too cared about how I'll be remembered after all of this. I just want to enjoy my time doing this while I can.
Absolutely, man. Well, Darius, I appreciate you taking time to come on in, man. I can't wait to see what guys got in store for you, and best of luck May 30th.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate you.
Of course, you always welcome on, man. God bless.
All right.
Appreciate everybody for tuning into the interview. I'll get that edited up and clipped down, then posted separately on my YouTube channel right after the show is completed. I'm going to go on a short break, and then we'll get right back to the rest of the show. See you guys shortly. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the SchuZ Show. I'm your host, Zach SchuZ Shoemaker. It's time to get into some boxing topics now in this portion of the show. First up, we're going to be doing a recap on the fights that happened this past weekend, and then I'm going to get into some boxing news right after that. There is a lot of stuff to get into after this weekend's fights. I previewed it on Friday, and I talked about how this weekend was going to be a weekend where there weren't necessarily a lot of blockbuster fights to say, but there's a lot of important fights that were going to set up boxing, for future greater fights. And that's what happened. And actually a lot more so than I even thought. As we had it's one of the three most controversial things in boxing happen this past weekend. Yeah, it's going to be Navarrete, Charlie Suarez, which I have a segment on that one planned for you guys. But there's a lot of stuff to get into today in regards to the boxing fights that happened this past weekend. So let's get right into it. Very first one I'm going to get into is in regards to what happened Saturday out in the UK. Anthony Cacace versus Lee Wood. IBO super featherweight title was on the line in this fight. All right, let me break down what happened here. So to set the stage, Cacace has been a guy that has been on an incredible run over the past year. He's become a world champion, and all these different things have gone perfectly for him. Really revolutionized his career to this point. And he decided to make an interesting move. Instead of going down the IBF mandatory route, he chose to relinquish his belt and go pursue his IBO belt instead. And because of doing that, he wanted to go pursue the fight with Lee Wood. Now, we all know who Lee Wood is. He's had an incredible career to this point, a very, very big figure in the UK. And Lee Wood decided that he's going to go move up a weight class for this fight. And let me be honest with you. Anthony Cacace showed why he has become one of the most improved fighters in all boxing, why he is one of the best fighters in all the 130-pound division. This man went from having a good career to, over the duration of the past year, has put himself in position where he is now regarded as one of the most exciting and most talented, I should say, probably even the most underrated fighter in all boxing right now. He picked Lee Wood apart from start to finish in that fight. And can I say something before I go any further on this? Judging scorecard is something that I feel like I have to complain about every single weekend. One judge had Lee Wood ahead at the time of the stoppage here in this fight. Absolutely outlandish. There was maybe a couple of rounds that I did give a couple of rounds to Lee Wood. However, those couple of rounds that he did win in that fight were very, very controversial, where to the extent I would even be okay saying if you didn't give Lee Wood those wins, or those rounds, I'd be okay to understand that. Anthony Cacace was clearly in control of that fight, all the way up to the point where they had to throw in the towel to stop the fight. And that was the right decision as well, just to be honest there. But Cacace did end up stopping Lee Wood in round 9 to retain his title. His power overwhelmed him, and Lee Wood struggled with that. We haven't seen Lee Wood step in the ring for a couple of years now, and on top of that, he moved up weight classes. You could say, was it the weight class being moved up that hindered him, or was it the fact that he's been out of the ring for some time? Was it also the fact that he's getting older in age? All these things could be on the table here. But the point is that there was such a large amount of variables that were not going his direction that all came together to create a night that just did not go according to plan for him. And it now puts Lee Wood in a situation where you have to wonder, is this sport what he really needs to keep on doing? As long as he's properly managed his money, he should be in a fine position financially to retire and move on. He should still have all of his resources intact in his mind as well, so he should be able to be successful in another avenue of life. He also has a family and those type of things. So when you look at it that aspect, is there really a reason for Lee Wood to return to the ring? And on top of that, the only thing you could really say, okay, that could be enticing for Lee Wood would be, should you go down the rebuilding your process and rebuilding your brand again? And to that I say, at his age, the uncertainty about what's going forward, is there a point in Lee Wood continuing his career? And to that I say probably not. But that's not my choice to make. That's obviously Lee Wood's. But if I were to make that choice for him, I would say, you know what? It's probably time for Lee Wood to move on. He has given the sport everything he has. He's had a good career, a good run. It's probably time to move on. Now, on the other side of that, Anthony Cacace, let me say this. As I've already alluded to, I think he is one of the most underrated fighters in all boxing right now. The run that he has been on has been phenomenal. He is dominating right now. And when you look at the 130-pound division, I don't see anybody that is drastically better than him. I see a lot of guys that he has a chance of beating. And so that leads me to this point. Who should he go after next? Now, 130 is an interesting weight class due to the fact that you have a lot of guys kind of in flux. You don't really know where they're going at right now. Navarrete, who I'll be talking about next, needs to be doing a rematch with Charlie Suarez. As much as I would love to see Navarrete versus Cacace, that is not a fight that needs to happen next. Navarrete owes Charlie Suarez that fight and should be mandated to give him that rematch. Besides that point right there, when I look at that fight, I say, okay, you have O'Shaquie Foster. That would be my preferred fight. I would love to see that one happen. But O'Shaquie Foster's also seeming to be going back and forth with Shakur Stevenson next right now. And there's been long rumors of those two guys having a title fight where O'Shaquie Foster moves up to 135 and challenges Shakur Stevenson. Is that something I could see happening? Sure. And so that kind of leaves you in a flux of where is 130 at right now? Navarrete should be mandated to do a rematch. O'Shaquie Foster's in the flux, possibly 135. Likewise with Lamont Roach. Another belt is vacant at the moment. Stephen Fulton's moving up. That could be the fight to make. So there's a lot of things that are on the table right now for Anthony Cacace. But what I will say is that regardless of what he does next, it needs to be for a title fight. He has more than earned that. Whether that be going for the vacant belt currently and you do a fight with Stephen Fulton, that could be the fight that would make a lot of sense in my opinion. That feels like the most guaranteed option to have happen just because of the fact that Fulton is likely moving up to 130. And at the same breath, you have a situation, like I said, where the other champions are all preoccupied for the time being. And I think he wants to stay somewhat active. So there's a lot of things on the table, though. He has earned another title shot, and that's really what Anthony Cacace's position is right now. Let's head into Saturday night. I'm going to paint the picture for you guys really quickly about what happened Saturday night. We headed into Saturday night with Emmanuel Navarrete, a guy whom I deem as a top 20 pound-for-pound type of guy, a guy that's in my tier 7 currently of boxers overall in the pound-for-pound tiers. Emmanuel Navarrete was an overwhelming favorite to beat Charlie Suarez, and rightfully so. And when we head into this game plan of what was a possible opportunity, what's the possible path for Charlie Suarez to defeat Emmanuel Navarrete, my answer to that was he's going to have to get a KO to some extent. That was his only path. He was not going to outbox Emmanuel Navarrete. Well, let's get into the fight now. We go through the fight up until the point where the very, very controversial action occurs, and let me break that portion down for you. Emmanuel Navarrete is doing his thing overall. I see the debate, and I understand why some people have had Charlie Suarez winning or up in that round at the time of the stoppage. Personally, I do believe Emmanuel Navarrete was up on my scorecards. I see the path that people were saying why they think Charlie Suarez should have been up. I personally had Emmanuel Navarrete up at that point in time. And this was a situation where Charlie Suarez was only going to beat Emmanuel Navarrete if it was via some form of a KO. Well, things get very interesting then. Because as we're going through this situation, all of a sudden, a massive punch is landed on Emmanuel Navarrete by Charlie Suarez. A punch that ends up resulting in a devastating cut. A brutal cut, to be honest. And they end up going through the end of that round. Obviously, they go through the 7th round and so on and so forth. And then eventually, we get to the point where the doctor has to look at Emmanuel Navarrete and they call it a fight. At that moment in time, there was a lot of controversy. And before I go off on what happened that night, let me make sure I make this very, very clear. I understand that the position that the judges were in at that moment in time was very, very difficult. Not until about 4 or 5 minutes after they were walking back to the locker room did we get that one angle that 100% clarified that was a legal punch that ended up resulting what should have been a KO for Charlie Suarez. So I'm not going to sit here and say this was such a point-blank obvious call that it had to be made, and I don't know how it's possible the judges missed it. I saw it from that one angle, and I thought, okay, it was a punch, but then the confirmation, clear-cut evidence was given about 5 minutes afterwards. That being said, that does not change the fact that how the situation was handled was poor. And that at the end of the day, this was a very, very odd situation. You don't really go to the monitor, and it's not this long until we have a decision that often in fights and boxing. But we go into the situation, and because of the fact that they deemed it an accidental headbutt, because they could not have clear-cut evidence proof that this was landed by a punch, ends up resulting in a devastating loss as of the moment for Charlie Suarez. And this is unfortunate. Because for those of you that do not know Charlie Suarez, he is older in age. This is not a young buck that's going to be having many, many more opportunities. Likely this is his final big shot at a world championship. And as I said, Charlie Suarez is not the type of guy that was going to probably outbox Emmanuel Navarrete through 12 rounds and win on points. It just wasn't going to happen. His route to victory was doing what you can only do in combat sports, where even if you are down by a bunch, and essentially if we're going to use football or basketball terms, you're being blown out, if that's occurring to you in combat sports, it's the only sport where 1 second, literally 1 split second, can alter and change that entire dynamic. You can erase if you want to use basketball terms, a 30-point lead off of one punch and end that within a victory in 1 second. Only sport you can do that in. And Charlie Suarez did exactly that. And yet we come to a situation now for Charlie Suarez where at his age, he landed the perfect punch. What ends up resulting in that? a loss for him to Mayo Navarrete. In what would have been not only Charlie Suarez's biggest win of his career, a win that would have made him a world champion, he would have had the biggest upset of the entire year. That could obviously have changed ultimately, but at this point in the year, that would have been the biggest upset in boxing this year. But that storyline that I just said, that did happen, but in technicality, in reality, according to the record books, did not happen. Charlie Suarez was robbed of a lifetime achievement that he worked his whole life for, simply because of the situation that unfolded here. And as I said, yes, I understand from the judge's standpoint, that one specific angle, when the zoomed in, I think whatever the camera angle was, that came in about 5 minutes after the ruling of the decision was given, did not come out on time yet. But it just makes you wonder, could they have waited more time? And now you're in a situation where not only does that whole true reality that should have happened situation not occur for Charlie Suarez, but now we're in a situation where, as of the moment, Charlie Suarez has a loss on his record. It is one of the worst swing of events you could possibly fathom or imagine. And yet that's the position that Charlie Suarez is placed in right now. It is a horrible situation he's got placed in. And at this point in time, there's only so many things that can be done, but that so many things that can be done must be done. And what am I referring to in that? Now, the California State Athletic Commission has said that they expect or overturn the result to a no contest. That should be absolutely. The fact that Charlie Suarez not only doesn't have that entire situation taken away from him, but he also has a loss added to his loss column is sad. So must be added to a no contest. And on top of that, let me make this very, very clear right now. There is no other route that needs to be taken right now other than Charlie Suarez and Emmanuel Navarrete rematching. And it makes perfect sense too. Not only does it have to happen, not only is it right, not only is it what's supposed to happen, but from a financial standpoint, that's a massive fight to now make. Everybody knows that it's a promoter's dream when controversy is involved. Whether that be an individual going on a Ryan Garcia run from what he did last year, or that be a controversial thing that occurs in a fight to make it a much bigger situation. We look at what's going to happen because of the Tank Davis situation. We look at something over in the UK, the Jamie TKV and David Adelaide situation. When controversy involved in boxing, it's a promoter's dream. This is the definition of controversy, and that rematch would be massive. Both obviously with Tom Brake, everything should be able to be situated. If Emmanuel Navarrete does not rightfully give Charlie Suarez the rematch, that is a massive problem, and people will lose a lot of respect for him. In fact, let me go even a step further. I think the way that he's reacting now, and I get it, you know that you were winning on the scorecards. You can say that. But you got caught. You lost that fight because that should have been a TKO. Sorry, my apologies on that. That should have been a TKO. And the fact that Emmanuel Navarrete wants to keep coming out and saying, oh, I don't know. I think it was a headbutt. It was a headbutt. No, it was not a headbutt. The punch that drew the blood, that caused the cut, that drew the blood, that was a punch. A very powerful punch, an impressive punch, but it was a punch. And I'm tired of going around in circles for Emmanuel Navarrete trying to say that this was a headbutt. Listen, we've all seen the evidence. We've all seen the video. This was not no headbutt. That was a punch. And in return, Emmanuel Navarrete needs to do the right thing and give Charlie Suarez his rematch. He's rightfully earned that. He deserves that. And we need to see a rematch between those two immediately. Now, I get obviously he's going to be a cut. He's going to have to heal up from, so on and so forth. But the next time Navarrete steps in the ring, it better be against Charlie Suarez. No ifs, ands, or buts. I don't even want to list any other opportunity for any other person. I said, yes, the Cacace fight versus Navarrete would be cool. No, that can happen later on. Emmanuel Navarrete has one sole responsibility and job to handle right now. That is to go and defeat and rematch Charlie Suarez. That should be the only thing on his mind. It doesn't matter how good you're performing in that fight. Yes, you're doing great. Boxing is one sport where a massive lead can be erased in a second. And that's what happened on Saturday night. And it's only right to give Charlie Suarez his rematch. Let's head into the co-main event from that top-ranked card. Raymond Muratalla versus Ora Abdullaev. That was a solid performance. Let me scratch that. That was a very, very good performance. I talked about this situation on Friday when I previewed this card, and I said, listen, I would not be shocked that on Monday when I talk to you guys, I'm going to be explaining why Raymond Muratalla is now one of the top and most exciting fighters to have in 135. Well, guess what, folks? Monday has now come. I'm going to tell you that as this. Raymond Muratalla is now one of the most exciting fighters to watch at 135. 135 is a fun weight class. We already know Tank Davis. We know Chris Stevenson. We know Keyshawn Davis. Those guys are all locked in. And we know the hypothetical Lomachenko, who I do believe will retire. But that whole weight class is fun. Now what's exciting is that, listen, the one question mark we all had was, okay, we have this extended absence for Lomachenko. What happens next? Where does Lomachenko go from now? I believe he's going to retire. I don't see him coming back. He now has until October 8th to obviously get back in the ring and make his fight. That being said, I do think he's going to retire, but we always were wondering, well, who's going to be that next guy up? Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you Raymond Muratalla. This was a fight between two of the top contenders for the IBF interim lightweight champion title. And in this fight, Raymond Muratalla put on a masterclass. Now, I'll be honest, I don't want to say it was start to finish masterclass because there were a couple of rounds in there where Zahur did have his performance going quite well, and he did win a couple of rounds there. But those first four, I think it was 4 or 5 rounds, Raymond Muratalla put on a clinic. And then the way he concluded, the way he adjusted in his fight and brought himself up to a position where easy win. 119 to 109 on 2 of the scorecards, 118 110 on the other one. Ladies and gentlemen, we have another guy that's a young rising fighter at 135 in Raymond Muratalla. This is a man to keep your eye on. And here's the outline for you guys. Obviously, with him now being the interim champion, he has the mandatory rights to go fight Lomachenko if and or when Lomachenko returns. As I already said, I don't see that happening, but if it does, obviously it's the fight that's going to have to be made. If not, he'll be promoted to the full-time champion, and then we're looking at a position where, okay, he can defend his belt or he can unify. And if he unifies, what would be a fight that would make a lot of sense? Let me think. Is there somebody else that's another fellow American that just became a world champion, that's also young, that's with the same promotional company, that have gone back and forth with each other a couple times before? Let me think. That's right. The man that's going to be fighting on June 7th in Norfolk, Virginia. Keyshawn Davis. That's the fight to make. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. I would love to see him defend his belt, whatever, sure. No, if we can get a unification between two of these guys, this is huge. Not only is it huge from the standpoint of, listen, it's going to be a big fight, but we kind of get to, in a sense, claim the next rising star of USA boxing, especially at the 135 division. Keyshawn Davis and Raymond Muratalla, whoever comes out of that fight, would be a unified champion at 135, something that we have not yet seen from the likes of Tank Davis and Shakur Stevenson. That would be absolutely phenomenal. And then from that point going forward, the winner of that fight easily sets themselves up to possibly go fight Tank Davis or Shakur Stevenson. Obviously, if it's Keyshawn Davis, it wouldn't be against Shakur Stevenson, but you get the point. And so then we get the ball rolling, and it's like, okay, well, hypothetically, a undisputed is possibly in sight then at 135. I don't think that's going to happen, but it would be possible. The point I'm making here is that Raymond Muratalla put on a great, great performance. It was incredible. As for Abdullah, obviously him going forward, he needs to regroup. I think a guy that would make a lot of sense would be fighting Denis Bergshchuk. He had a world champion, just lost his belt, obviously Keyshawn Davis. I don't think he's going to get that belt back anytime soon, but I think that'd be a solid fight for both guys to rebound against with each other. However, Raymond Muratalla is legit. I think Raymond Muratalla is going to be a problem for a while, and I think he's going to be a guy that we've now can officially say, yes, when you talk about some of the top up-and-coming next world champion stars or whatever you want to call it in USA boxing, I can give you guys a name that perfectly fits that list right there, that description. His name is Raymond Muratalla. That's how high I am on him. Let's go to the other fight that was on that card, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I am just going to make this a very, very clear statement. Andres Cortez, Salvador Jimenez. I had Andres Cortez on the show a couple weeks ago. He previewed this fight, said he's going to be an early KO, said all the good old stuff about that fight. Well, we come fast forward to Saturday night, and it was a very lackluster performance. It was a very clear-cut win. Don't get that mistaken or twisted up. 100-90 on 2 of the scorecards, 99-91 on the other one. He clearly beat Salvador Jimenez. And it does take 2 guys to tango. Both guys are at fault for that. But it was absolutely pathetic performance from both parties. Like I said, Cortez clearly won the fight. No ifs, ands, or buts. But that fight right there was, and he talked about this when he came on the show, Andres Cortez was specifically put on this fight card because of who the main event was. Charles Suarez with Emmanuel Navarrete going for the championship. That was a situation where Andres Cortez was supposed to have a dominant performance against Salvador Jimenez, in which would have put himself in position to possibly challenge the winner of Emmanuel Navarrete versus Charles Suarez. Obviously, that fight should have a rematch, as already discussed, so Andres Cortez wouldn't get that regardless now. But before the fight even happened, the controversy occurred, there was already a very, very, very clear-cut situation and already statement made that Andres Cortez would not have gotten the winner regardless. That performance was not very, very good. He has a lot of lackluster performance in that performance right there, and it was not good. He failed to impress. And so for him, he's still a good fighter. Don't get that twisted. But I think he's still another fight or 2 away from world championship. So what's next for him? Well, Cortez needs to make sure he goes and targets somebody else as an up-and-coming tune-up fight for himself. or a guy that's probably ranked somewhere in the top 15 to try to prove yourself. Show that you are that guy and that you deserve a world title shot after the Emmanuel Navarrete and Charlie Suarez. And in fact, we could even run this back. When the rematch of Emmanuel Navarrete and Charlie Suarez happens, throw Cortez on that card again, and hopefully he has the type of performance that sets himself up for a world title shot. That's my personal opinions right there. Let's head over to another fight that's happening about the same exact time, and that's Erickson Lubin versus Ardariel Holmes Jr. for the IBF Super Welterweight title eliminator. This was a performance in a fight that was interesting. I thought Lubin was going to win the fight, and I was correct in that statement. Lubin stopped Holmes in round 11. He was gradually breaking him down. It was not a high-action fight, not a very, very entertaining fight, but Lubin got the job done. I think we saw that Holmes, he struggled with his pressure, he struggled with his power. Holmes is a good fighter, but not one of those top-tier guys at 154. And the problem is that 154 is stacked. Lots of big-name fighters at 154 from top to bottom. And so it kind of makes you wonder, where's Holmes going to go from here? Well, he's got to work on his ability to handle pressure. He's got to grow a lot as a fighter. So there's going to be other fights he can be a part of. But Lubin was clearly the superior fighter in that fight. He got the KO, and that puts him in position now to go become the mandatory challenger for Bakram Murzavaliev. What will I say about that? Well, here's my opinion. First and foremost, I will always clarify this. I don't believe that Bud Crawford is going to be fighting at 154 ever again. I think he's going to go up to 168 and fight Canelo, whether it be one or two fights. And at that point in time, I think he's going to consider retirement. So I don't really consider Bud Crawford. If Bud Crawford's still at 154, he's the best fighter at 154 regardless. Let's hypothetically remove Bud Crawford from 154 because he's not going to be fighting there for the foreseeable future anyways. If you remove Bud Crawford, I believe that Bakram Murzavaliev is the best fighter at 154. I think the way that you look at the way he's dominated fighters, his aggression, his ability to put pressure on guys, his advantages, his overall top to bottom, I feel like he's the most feared guy, second to Virgil Ortiz. I think Virgil, or not second to Virgil Ortiz, my apologies on the wording there. Virgil Ortiz is the only guy that I'd say would be a good running for him. I think when you talk about those two guys, the two top guys at 154 right now, outside of Bud Crawford. And so when you look at Erickson Lubin, he is a good fighter. He is in the top echelons of fighters at 154. But when you say he's going to have to go fight Bakram Murzavaliev, that's the fight that he should push for. Payday, obviously a big opportunity, a world title shot. You don't want to turn that down. At the same breath, that's going to be a dangerous fight for him. And I don't believe he's going to pose any threat to Bakram Murzavaliev. Easy work for Bakram, but still at the same time, you're going to pursue that fight. It's a world title shot, big payday. Take that opportunity while you have it. And that'd be a good test for Bakram Murzavaliev. And after that, Murzavaliev should likely go on in pursuit of a unification fight. That's my personal opinion on that fight right there. Let's over to Sunday. Okay, my time at least, early or middle of the night, morning time, whatever you want to say it. Fernando Puma Martinez versus Kazuto Ioka, WBA Junior Bantamweight title. And this fight was a lot closer than the first fight. Remember, this was a rematch from the previous fight. It was also scheduled to happen on December 31st, if I'm not mistaken, of last year. Ends up getting postponed to now. We have this fight come to fruition. And it was a much, much better fight than the first time around. Scorecards read this: 114, 113, 115, 112, 117, 110, all in favor of Martinez. The 117, 110 out scorecard was outlandish. I'm not sure how you get a drop and you still give the scorecard 117, 110 favor for Martinez. Absolutely against that scorecard, atrocious there. But I think Puma Martinez definitely won the fight, but it was a very, very close fight. Give all props to Ioka for making this a very competitive fight to the point where he even dropped Martinez in round 10. So very, very good fight, very entertaining fight. And I think that's what's great. We saw that Ioka was able to sustain competitiveness this time all the way through the fight, and I was very impressed with his performance. So now it puts both guys in a situation that's interesting. For Puma Martinez, he could look for unification against the winner of the other unification fight happening between Puma Lekafu, Bam Rodriguez. I personally think that Bam Rodriguez is going to go for undisputed at 115. That seems to be his plan. So he does not seem to want to move up and go fight Junto Nakatani. Therefore, I see that fight possibly coming to fruition. The other side of that is that could he move up to 118? We know that Martinez struggled in this fight to be able to make weight. I think it's getting tougher and tougher for him to make 115. Does he make that transition up to bantamweight? I would not be shocked. I could definitely see him moving up to bantamweight, and I actually think that's what he's probably going to end up doing down the road, if not this next fight. So that's what I see for him. On the other side of that, for Ioka, I think he's going to consider retirement. You know, he could make one last run. There's obviously other fights: Juan Francisco Estrada, Roman Gonzalez. Both those guys could make sense for him. But for the time being, I personally just look at the opportunity there for himself and say, you know what? He's accomplished a lot. He's had a good run. It probably is time to put down the gloves and retire. But once again, very similar to what I said earlier when I talked about Lee Wood. This is for him to make that decision. He's accomplished what he's accomplished. Is he satisfied? Is he ready to hang it up? I personally think that's going to be something he's going to seriously consider, but only time will tell if that's actually what's going to come to fruition now. Now, I'm going to go on a very, very short break. Then I'm going to come back and wrap up the show with some other boxing news come out. But I'll see you guys very shortly. May God bless you guys. See you in a few minutes. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the SchuZ Show. I'm your host, Zach SchuZ Shoemaker. And now we're getting into some boxing news. First and foremost, right at the top of this show, in this segment, Top Rank will now be on 3 TV networks. That seems to be the plan that they're making in store right now. Not sure if it's going to be coming to fruition, but that's the plan that Top Rank has. They have been rumored to be in discussions with IMAX, with Max and DAZN. And this pretty much the plan. Is what Bob Arm said. Now, there's going to be 3 outlets with Top Rank, more dates than we have now, both streaming and free to air. Interesting to see right there. Listen, when it comes to all these TV deals, we know that they're going to be available. 3 TV networks seems a little bit odd. I personally am not opposed to those that just decide to go throw all of boxing pretty much out and onto the zone. I'm all for that idea. I don't really mind that. I think that's actually a good idea to have it all on one platform. However, the 3 would be interesting, but we'll see how that comes to fruition. I think when you talk about the 2 best producers that have boxing right now, obviously Netflix has great resources. Netflix is great, as is DAZN. But we'll see what they end up doing there from there. Isaac Pitbull Cruz versus Angel Fiora will fight in a rematch on the Pacquiao versus Barrios card. Their first fight was the fight of the year candidate. That means that we're going to also have Fedor versus Tim Tszyu. 2 will be on the co-main event. And so that fight card is going to come together. I think it's going to be a very, very intriguing fight card. And this is what I'm going to say. Do I like the Manny Pacquiao fight? Absolutely not. I think it's a disgrace to boxing. You guys can say whatever you guys want to me about that. It is what it is. It's not safe for him to be fighting that fight. He needs to give up boxing, put the gloves down. But as a boxing fan, very similar to what happened and I've said about the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson fight, is that there still was a great undercard for Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. And I think we're going to get that put together here now where we have a great fight card being put together, and I'm very happy to see that. Billy Joe Saunders says he has told the ring that he is now eyeing a return to the ring after meeting with Frank Warren to discuss a potential light heavyweight comeback in September. This all makes a lot more sense now. And why would I say that? Well, I said last week that Chris Eubank Jr. has outlined his next 3 fights that he has planned. And that third and final one he outlined was that he wanted to fight Billy Joe Saunders in a rematch. And I said that, okay, I see why he wants that, but he isn't returning to the ring anytime soon. Well, now comes out the new news that he apparently is planning on returning to the ring in September. That will leave the door open, obviously, for the rematch for Chris Eubank Jr. and Billy Joe Saunders to have happen. And I think that'd be a huge fight to make down the road. Eddie Hearn has also said that he's now made another offer to Brian Norman Jr. for a 3-belt unification fight with Jerome Boots Ennis. And he said this exact quote. We've even said to them, if you are taking that fight in Japan, let's lock in the Boots fight in for after that. October, November, December, whenever. And they come back and said, we don't want to talk about any other fights until we have the Sasaki fight. You know, this is interesting. I feel like there's so much drama always surrounding this Brian Norman fight. First of all, I can't always put my fingertip on what exactly it is. You know, there's obviously a side of the story where it seems like Eddie Hearn using his massive ability to promote, his superior ability to promote, and is in doing so has made the situation appear as if Brian Norman continues to duck Boots Ennis time and time again. But I'm sure there's another side of the story. I don't have the exact answer here. At the end of the day, Brian Norman Jr., there's no unification fight unless he beats Sasaki. And I'm all for having that fight against Sasaki. And so I think it's going to be a great fight. And so I think that should be his focus. But obviously, everybody knows that boxing teams, their managers, have multiple fights lined up for fighters going forward. So both sides can be true here. And what I do wonder is that, okay, eventually the time has to come where we do get Brian Norman versus Boots Ennis. Boots Ennis is going for undisputed at 147. Unless he moves to 154, which does not seem very likely, he wants 147. And as long as that's the case and as long as that's the story here, that fight has to happen eventually. It's going to be a big payday for Brian Norman. And listen, I think it actually would be even bigger if Brian Norman goes out there and does this thing against Sasaki. I think it sets up a massive opportunity for a mega unification fight between Boots and Brian Norman. But it is interesting to see the fact that once again, we seem to be in the same position where Brian Norman appears, according to Eddie Hearn, to be avoiding him. Now, I will say this, Brian Norman did do the laughing emoji in the comments, appearing to say that this fight was never going to happen anyways, or saying that Eddie Hearn is lying. I'm not quite sure the context there, but I'm just going to say this. That fight has to happen. If they want to take care of business first against Sasaki, that's fine. If they don't want to take care of business, that fight never is going to happen anyways. But if Brian Norman defeats Sasaki in this couple months later, that fight must between him and Boots Ennis must happen. End of discussion. Other news, Kieran Conway will fight for the British Commonwealth title on the Fisher Allen card this Saturday, as will George Ledard, fighting for the Commonwealth Silver and British title eliminator on the same card. Now, if they both win, they will fight each other next, Eddie Hearn has said. This is exactly what George Ledard said he wants to accomplish and have done on our interview on Friday. So it seems to be that that's very much so in the works now. I know Brad Paul's also is in the mix for that fight right there. And I know he said that he wants that fight on our interview on Thursday. However, I think that George Ladard, if he gets the win here, it appears that Eddie Hearn is saying that he's going to get that opportunity. And so Brad Paul would have to do another win or two to get back to that British title. Other sources that came out and said this: while the venue is not official yet for the July 12th Berlanga Shiraz and Stevenson Zepeda card, which will take place in New York, there is a good chance that it lands in the Louis Armstrong Stadium. It's a 14,000-seater with a retractable roof at the National Tennis Center in Queens, New York. We've all been wondering where exactly is this fight going to happen at. This seems to make a lot of sense here. I think it'd be a cool atmosphere. It'd be different. It'd be unique. And I'm all for it. But now it's not official. Just what we apparently are getting news coming out from. And that came from Dan Raphael. So we'll see what ends up happening there. The last thing I want to get into before I wrap today's show up is with this. The undisputed super bantamweight champion, Naoya Inoue, has laid out his potential next 3 opponents in the April issue of the Ring magazine. He says these are the next 3 guys he wants to fight. Up first, MJ. That's the fight we've all been saying. I think September is the month we're going to see that fight occur. Maybe at the very, very latest October, but September is my guess for that fight in Tokyo. Massive fight. The best fight you could probably, I don't want to say the best fight, I'm sure you can make a couple contenders fights, but the best championship opposition possible for Inoue is MJ. We'll get that fight September. Then he says Nick Ball. That one is interesting because of the order here. I thought it was going to be a situation where he maybe gets another fight in before Junto Nakatani, but according to this, he says he wants to fight Nick Ball, meaning that he would be moving up to challenge for a world title by the end of this year, most likely. Could possibly be Wembley Stadium, and you could have that fight against Nick Ball going down. That would be him moving up to 126. His third guy on that list that he wants to fight after that is Junto Nakatani. Why do I think that interests me? Because this would be 122 fight for MJ, moving up to 126 for Nick Ball, and then for Junto Nakatani, I'm assuming Junto's not moving up 2 weight classes. Therefore, it's either going to be at 120. That has to be at 122 then. So we'd go from 22 to 26 back down to 22 for Junto Nakatani, and then move on from that point. Let me make this clear. I already believe that Inoue is the best fighter in boxing, in my opinion, but at the same time, I have him, Usyk, and Bud at the same tier. If this is the path that Inoue takes over the duration of, that's probably going to take him about 8 to 10 months, the way he likes to fights every 3 to 4 months. If he makes it clean out of that, 3-0, there should be no debate, no discussion as to who the pound-for-pound number 1 fighter in the world is. That would mean you cleared house at 122 by the MJ fight. That means that you have now become a world champion in 4 divisions by then fighting Nick Ball and becoming world champion at 126. And then that means you would be going back down to 122 and officially putting your stamp as the best fighter at 122, one of the best ever, to be honest, at that point in time, by defeating the likes of a guy like Junto Nakatani. That would be a mega fight against a guy who is a pound for pound at that point in time, likely top 8, 7, 6, whatever it's going to be. Junto Nakatani is on most people's top 10 pound for pound. Those 3 fights would, without a shadow of a doubt, make Naoya Inoue the number 1 pound for pound fighter in the world. No debates. I already have him there, but that would probably separate him from Bud Crawford and Usyk. Now, obviously, if Bud beats Canelo, things can get different debates there. But still, that track record over a duration of the next 8 to 10 months would be phenomenal if Inoue can pull that off. I think he has a legitimate chance to. I think he's going to destroy MJ. Nick Ball is going to be very interesting. I think that could be very, very interesting, especially if it's done in the UK. And then Junto Nakatani, I think he gets that fight easily. Not easily. None of these are easy, but I think he defeats Junto Nakatani because of the fact that, listen, Junto Nakatani is phenomenal. He's in my top 10 pound for pound. I absolutely love the way he fights. But when you talk about Inoue being more experienced in his physical prime, being at 122 longer, and obviously then you have Junto Nakatani moving up weight classes, there's a lot of things going against Nakatani. You could say this very same thing if Inoue does go up to 126 and then backtracks to 122. That weight cut could be difficult for him. I'm sure he'll figure it out though. But I have Inoue being Nakatani. So the hardest fight for me, in my opinion, is Nick Ball because of the fact that you're moving up weight classes and the rumors that that fight would be taking place in the UK. So that's my takes on that. But no, if Inoue does that run, absolutely phenomenal. Pound for pound number 1 without a shadow of a doubt, in my opinion. With that being said, though, I appreciate each and every single one of you guys for tuning into today's show. I hope you guys had a great time. I'll get some of these clips posted out for you guys shortly. And with that being said, I will see you guys tomorrow. I believe tomorrow will be an earlier show, 12 o'clock my time. I've got a guest coming on tomorrow. I'll have him on, break down some more boxing topics. But with that being said, I hope you guys have a great rest of you guys Monday. May God bless you guys all. Hope you guys also had a great weekend as well. But I'll see you guys tomorrow. May God bless you guys all, and SchuZ out.